With the Russia-Ukraine war lasting more than 1,000 days, Kyiv has remained steadfast in its pursuit of a full NATO membership as a key security objective. While NATO claims Ukraine's path to membership is irreversible, a lack of consensus among its 32 members leaves the membership hanging in the balance. On the other hand, Moscow warned that Ukraine's accession to NATO will be tantamounted to serious threat, raising questions about further escalation. And as the alliance awaits Donald Trump's return to the White House, what will be the future of Ukraine in NATO? That's going to be our discussion today in depth. Stay tuned and welcome. In Brussels, NATO members gathered with one clear priority: to rally support for Ukraine. Ukraine has declared that it would not settle for anything less than NATO membership to guarantee its future security, as the alliance sidestepped Kyiv's call for an immediate invitation at the foreign ministers' meeting on Tuesday. The alliance's Secretary-General Mark Rutte stated that NATO foreign ministers have agreed that providing air defense systems to protect Ukraine's infrastructure against Russian attacks has to be a priority. Although NATO has stated that Ukraine's path to membership is irreversible, the alliance has not set a date or issued an invitation, with diplomats claiming there's no consensus among its 32 members to do so. According to officials, some countries are holding off on their stance until they learn the position of Donald Trump's incoming administration. As the NATO ministerial meeting in Brussels lasts for another day, the Kyiv Independent highlighted the outcomes of yesterday's talks. The Ukrainian delegation is attending the meeting, hoping for an invitation to join the alliance, but recent statements and reports suggest that a consensus is unlikely. According to the newspaper, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha urged members to send the invitation this week as a step toward a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Additionally, Kyiv has previously rejected other security guarantees as substitutes for a full membership. The newspaper added that Ukraine's accession would require unanimous agreement among all members. Meanwhile, the Voice of America drew attention to the Western leaders calling for continued military support to Ukraine, but are balking at the Kyiv government immediately joining NATO. Meeting with NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discussed what the U.S. State Department said were concrete steps the West could take to help Ukraine defend itself. The newspaper also highlighted Rutte's statement that the immediate priority goes to providing more arms to Ukraine. In addition, Zelensky said on Sunday that an invitation to join NATO would fundamentally strengthen Ukraine before any negotiations to end the war. To further discuss these developments, we are joined now from Kyiv by Ivan Ues, the chief consultant at the National Institute for Strategic Studies. Welcome. And from Berlin, we are joined by Jassim Mohammed, the head of the European Center for Counterterrorism and Intelligence Studies. Welcome to the program. Now, let me start from Kyiv. Ivan, now, Ukrainian President Zelensky proposed allowing those parts of Ukraine that are under its control to join the NATO alliance. Can this be done, and what are the complexities of such a proposal at this time?
Good evening from Kyiv. Greetings to studio guests and all audience. So, of course, for Ukraine, the question of NATO as a question of joining to the European Union as existential question. That's why a whole war that starts in 2014 and full-scale war that starts on the February 2022, one of the main targets that exists in Ukraine is joining to all those alliances, I mean NATO and European Union. And President Zelensky, when he expressed the will of Ukraine to be in NATO, of course, he first of all expressed the will of majority of Ukrainian population. We understand in Ukraine that it's a large list of problems in Ukrainian joining to NATO now. First of all, existing war. We understand reality that NATO members will never give green light to Ukraine in NATO while we have a war. That's why now, as of now at least, Ukraine asked for increasing support and promise that after the end of the war, the Ukrainian chances in NATO will be higher, because promises to be in NATO, Ukraine received for several decades or so. Just after the split of the USSR, at least last 20 years of our history, we constantly hear the statement that, oh, Ukraine will be NATO. But now I think that, as I said before, our existential target to be in NATO just because we need security.
But what about the proposal of the Ukrainian president about allowing parts of Ukraine to join the NATO? Do you think this is possible? I mean, technically it could happen, but politically, could it be done?
Politically, it's extremely hard, but you know that Ukraine and President Zelensky presented so-called victory plan, and 2 points or 2 chapters of that victory plan, as for me, was written or were written by former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and US Senator Lindsey Graham. So Boris Johnson proposed the idea that Ukrainian army can substitute the US army in Europe, because President Trump, elected President Trump, he said that he wants to send out US soldiers from Europe and substitute them by some other soldiers. So Boris Johnson proposed the idea that it should be Ukraine. But for making that step, Ukraine needs to be in NATO. That's why I think that this victory plan, at least the chapter written by Boris Johnson, oriented on Ukrainian membership in NATO. I mean, political step oriented on Donald Trump, that the reason why Ukraine should be in NATO, because in that case, Ukraine substitute US. Thank you.
But we will talk, of course, about the Donald Trump administration and its impact, perhaps, on what's going to happen in this war. Let me go to Jassim Mohammed from Berlin. Now, the question is whether Western partners, above all, the most important of these partners, the United States, have the political will and power to actually grant membership to those parts of Ukraine that remain under its control, or even if it's full membership.
Regarding membership or admitting Ukraine in NATO, there is no unified attitude in NATO. For some example, that if we talk about European also divided. So Western Union, France, Germany, Italy, they show their rejection for admitting Ukraine to NATO because they think that if they accept admitting of Ukraine, it means they should also defend Ukraine according to the article number 5 for the NATO. It means that if admitting Ukraine to the NATO, it means European drag into direct war with the Russia.
But according to Article 5 also, Mr. Jassim,
Article 5,
yeah, according to Article 5, yes, it is the cornerstone of the NATO military alliance. It calls for all members to assist any other NATO countries that are under attack. However, it's to the members to decide how to aid other members that are under attack. So it just depends on what kind of aid they want to give.
If they carried out, or if there is any possibility for that admitting Ukraine to NATO, so that I believe that all members of NATO should be obliged to defend Ukraine according to Article number 5. And that means it will be a direct war between
Okay.
NATO and Russia. And that maybe it's not for interest right now or in this period of time for European and even for the NATO, so that they want to avoid any direct war with the Russia, maybe within the 5 years or within the next 5 years. But there is another also attitude in East Europe. If we talk about Baltic European country, Poland, they encourage and they support membership admitting Ukraine to the NATO. They think that will bolster their attitude against any expected threat from Russia. But in the north of Europe, if you review the map of European in the north, we see that Sweden, maybe Finland, who admit lately to the NATO, they are also understand the reason why Ukraine interested to be a
Right.
membership of NATO. There is one point that what is looking for Ukraine to be a member in the NATO is for geopolitical reason, to get more strong, mostly for military reason, to be, for example, to be ready military, politically, against any expected threat from Russia.
Okay. Now, Mr. Ivan, how do you comment on this? Because Mr. Jassim, he expanded on the idea of whether the NATO members would allow Ukraine to be part of the NATO. Because as the U.S. wants, perhaps if the U.S. wants to give Ukraine NATO membership, and if Ukraine is actually wanting this NATO membership right now, there are German security experts, for instance, they warn that such a move would greatly increase the risk of dragging NATO members into a full-scale war. What do you think of that?
I understand the position of Germany and the position of other countries that are afraid of that. But first of all, I don't think that Russia is such a big strength that a lot of people think that it is. Actually, it is. I think that Russia that failed to win the war versus Ukraine for 3 years, and they plan to do that, receive victory for 3 days. It's a good demonstration of the fact that Russia's strength over-exaggerated. It's a first moment. Second, Ukraine.
But just allow me to interrupt here for 1 second, because one could argue that Ukraine has had full support during these 3 years against Russia.
I absolutely agree, but let's be frank, the support appeared not at the first weeks and even not at the first months of full-scale war. Yes, we received support before war from US and from the United Kingdom, some weapon, but the main portion of that support Ukraine started to receive a little bit later. Even fighter jets that appeared in Ukrainian hands appears just several months ago, not at the beginning of this war. Then another moment that's very important just for me, for Europe to understand, that Ukraine now looks like Hungary in the year of 1956. The moment when Soviet Union want to control absolutely Hungary, the head of broadcasting service of Hungary said a very genius phrase, say to Europe that we Hungarians dying for ourselves and for Europe. Right. In the same situation, Ukraine now. And that's what Ukraine want Europeans to understand and to look through that situation. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Jassim, now Kyiv has said joining NATO will pave the way to peace, and whether we agree or disagree if that's before or after the war now, the idea that Putin would allow any part of Ukraine to join NATO is, at least for now, unthinkable. How do you comment on this?
Regarding the expected Russia or Kremlin, they said that it's a red line for Ukraine to admit to NATO. So what it is expected, or what is the expected response from Ukraine, from Russia? I believe that Russia, of course, will escalate its military operation inside Ukraine, and the other thing also will intensify its military operation, maybe in the region, in Europe.
So why would Zelensky say that joining NATO will pave the way to peace, if he knows Putin's stance?
Because we know that Zelensky, every time he wants to get support from European, and every time he also want to maybe get more support from the NATO, from European, because they think, or Zelensky think that if he is a member of, or Ukraine is a member of the NATO, maybe will encourage or will support Ukraine to defend and support itself against any expected threat from Russia. But in any occasion, I believe if there is any admitting for Ukraine to NATO, Kremlin, Russia said it is red line, and it is expected will escalate war, and will escalate its war inside Ukraine, inside Europe maybe, and maybe we get also nuclear tactical nuclear war, or maybe a nuclear war. So maybe for all these factors, I believe Zelensky, of course, consider of it.
All right, Mr. Ivan, the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has spoken at the current meeting of the foreign ministers in Brussels, the NATO foreign ministers, of course. He said that Ukraine doesn't need any new discussions about how to attain a ceasefire. It needs more arms and more missile defense capabilities. What does he mean by that?
He means that, first of all, Russia attacked Ukraine. Russia created damage at $1.1 trillion USD for those 3 years. Russia murdered enormous quantity of civilians in Ukraine. A lot of children were murdered. So it means that when we said that we are searching some deal, it means that we forgot Russian crimes. Crimes should not be forgotten. Crimes should receive punishment. And that's what Mr. Rutte said, that Ukraine should receive enough weapon just to defend its independence, just to return its territory. Ukraine don't want to conquer some Russian territory, let's be frank. Ukraine needs to defend our own territory. And Mark Rutte actually said that we should give to Ukraine this option to defend itself, and after that we will think about the future world, what rules it will exist. But returning to Ukraine and NATO, it will be guarantee of non-attacking from Russia, because Russia, of course, remain after that war. Russia will exist and will be a threat for Europe and Ukraine. And if Ukraine will be part of NATO, part of Euro-Atlantic Union, it means guarantees that Russia will not risk to attack it, because, as I said at the beginning, Russia could not win the war versus Ukraine. Let's imagine what will be if the war will be between Russia and NATO. I think Russia lost in 3 weeks or so.
All right. Mr. Jessim, now let's talk about the Trump factor. Donald Trump has stated many times that he's going to end this war and end this conflict. What's the impact that we are going to expect when Trump takes office?
When we talk about policy of the nuclear White House by President Trump, it is very clear, and maybe he said it indirectly, that it could be a direct contact between United States, Washington, and Russia. And in this case, he will put pressure on Ukraine, and he will put pressure on silent European. So for that reason, it means the game, it will be directly between Trump and Putin. For that reason, I believe that Ukraine has no choice only to accept the Trump efforts, and of course European, because Trump, United States are the main supporter to Ukraine.
Okay.
For that reason, I expect that he has much confidence in his policy to stop the war, because he doesn't want to pay much cost, because we know how much NATO and how much United States as the first supporter, and the second supporter is Germany.
But he's not really a big fan. He's not really a big fan of the NATO alliance, is he?
Sorry?
He's not really a big fan of the NATO alliance. That was evident in his first term, wasn't it?
I believe there is a good sign. There is a good sign that Trump will use pressure and will reduce the cost of war exactly in Ukraine.
All right, Mr. Ivan. Now, talking about Donald Trump, there are some sources cited by the Wall Street Journal saying, from the inner circle of Trump, saying that perhaps Trump may be looking to delay Ukraine's NATO membership by 20 years. What do you think Trump is going to do when he takes office, and how is he going to impact first the conflict and also Ukraine's relationship with whether the United States or the NATO alliance as a whole?
I think Trump still don't have a clear plan. So, of course, there is a statement of what he thinks to do, but there is no clear plan. About 20 years in Ukraine and NATO, I think that Trump needs more arguments what is an interest to the United States of America to see Ukraine in NATO. And that's why this victory plan prepared by President Zelensky, but as I said, 2 chapters of the plan were prepared by former UK Prime Minister and Boris Johnson and Lindsey Graham. They are oriented on explanation to Donald Trump that you understand the pluses of Ukrainian membership in NATO. First place, that Ukraine substitute US soldiers in Europe. Second plus, that US can be more engaged in different minerals that exist in Ukrainian land. It means using them, so organizing production chains, and that's all will be in interest of America. So I think that the main question in the dialogue between Ukraine and Trump through the prism of NATO, it's explanation of US interest. Explanation why it will be so nice to US that Ukraine will be in NATO, and of course that it will be victory of Western Bloc, the main country of which is the United States of America. So Trump likes to say, let's make America great again. So how Ukrainian membership in NATO can make America greater than actually they is of now, and how it could help them to be better. That's, I think, the main reasons for discussion with Trump's question. Thank you.
That's a very interesting take on that. Thank you very much. That was from Kyiv, Ivan US, the chief consultant at the National Institute for Strategic Studies, and from Berlin, Jassim Mohammed, the head of the European Center for Counterterrorism and Intelligence Studies. Thank you for your insights. That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thank you for watching. I'm Karim Hatem, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.